Well, I have somebody with me today that's going to be of great interest to you. You know, he actually was tapped into to run the first Christian presidential campaign. That was Pat Robertson's campaign years ago when Christians started to enter into the scene of politics. This is the guy that discovered there was a Christian community that was indeed about to put Ronald Reagan in office. He comes from that long a period of time, Milton Friedman associate, the great economist, and he's been talking to the current day counterparts in the Democratic Party, and they've been whispering to him what their plans are because of their concerns about Biden's age and the down ticket effect he's going to have. You're going to want to listen to this program as we talk about the economic shaking that this brilliant economist is telling me is coming inevitably at the end of 2024, October, November. You're going to start to see the tremors, and then boom, in 2025, it's full tilt boogie. You're going to watch this shaking happen. But I've got something I want you to think about. I've been predicting this because this man's been talking to me for the last 7 years about what's coming. And I created a product called the End Game. The rise and fall of nations. We're going to see states like Florida and Texas and Oklahoma are going to start to rise up in this next economic shaking. They're going to become more autonomous and self-sufficient because there's a shaking of nations, a shaking of regions, a shaking of cities. And I want you to learn how to interpret the prophetic signs that are in the news, discover your role in the end game of what's happening in the United States and in the world, because sheep and goat nations are coming up. But at the same time that this economic turmoil and political turmoil comes, God is raising up an unshakable kingdom. I want you to go to lancewallnau.com/endgame, lancewallnau.com/endgame, and find out about the power that is being released as heaven's angelic armies are reordering the harvest of nations, regions, and cities, and how you can position yourself so that you don't lose your mind, but you find the mind of Christ in the coming shaking. lancewallnau.com/endgame. You'll be happy you have that information. Now let's go into our rather extraordinary interview with Marc Nuttle. Fortunate for us that I'm tapping into one of the great inside, well, what can I say? He's a professor, he's a guru, he's a Yoda to many of us. Marc Nuttle is one of the great secret weapons, I think, in God's arsenal. He served in the Reagan administration, was a close personal friend of the economist Milton Friedman, who you need to know more about, you younger folks especially. He's a champion of the battle for how America can survive. He's got a Christian worldview. He'll tell us today what's really happening in the world that you're not hearing from anyone else. What's really going on with Russia, what's really going on with China. And folks, if you think there's a big global reset that the hobgoblins of the global elites over there at the G12 or at Davos are working on, your suspicions are absolutely right. But Marc Nuttle has a plan that God may be implementing. There's 100 other ways we can go down the road of who this guy is, but I want to get right into this conversation right now. I have with me Marc Nuttle. Thank you for being in the studio. We're going to have a lot of fun today.
Thanks, Lance. Always good to be with you. Thanks.
Good to be with you, my brother. And Mercedes Sparks happened to stop by, and I saw her sitting down at her desk over there, and I said, Mercedes, get the camera. She's joining the conversation because I like to have that millennial perspective on the historic trend lines. It's the bridging of generations here that I like to do. And Marc, you in your distinguished career, I should also say that you were the point person that helped us to meet with Deng Xiaoping to help integrate China, of all things, into the global economy. He was the guy sent to kind of like set up a stock exchange or, for whatever. And you're the only American that I know that's actually had one-on-one conversations and debates with the dictators of the Communist Party. And your insights are priceless. You're going to love this conversation. So let's get right into it. First of all, forgive me for being tabloid, news focused, but everybody out there in my staff is saying, what does he say about what the Democrats are going to do? What's going to happen with Trump? I hate to say that, there's so many profound issues we could be talking about, but we have to start with this. So let's begin there. What do you foresee as a I wouldn't say prophetic, but as an accurate predictor of trends that are prescient and precise and like an economist, they happen. What do you see happening? And what are your inside people telling you?
Well, first, just for the good of the audience, I did run a presidential campaign and a national party at one time where we would do analysis of the people's attitudes and perspectives of what they were willing, first to receive as truth, and in their cultural values, how they were willing to apply it. The dilemma that the Democratic strategists, my counterparts that are still in D.C., are facing is they have an intractable problem in that they have a candidate that people believe are incapable of administering the job of President of the United States. It's not policy. It's not about even what's personal to them. If you can make a person personally flawed to the point that they can't function, then you can't elect them. And this has been a problem, fairly or unfairly, for President Biden. Last October, some strategists went to him and told him about this, that there was not a policy issue that they could advance that would make people proactively vote for him, maybe even less than 50%, and ask him if he would consider stepping down, and I'm told that was rejected. Now, that problem has not solved itself, Lance, because it's unsolvable. It's not policy. It's just they have the ability and capacity to serve. There's a poll that just came out 2 days ago, and I think actually ABC broadcast it. 47% of the American public now say they will not vote for Joe Biden under any circumstances. Okay, that still doesn't mean he's unelectable. If you can make your opponent so monstrous, so unacceptable in character.
It's so sad. I mean, what they got to do is they got to recreate the who do you hate more? And it's not that I really like Trump. It's that I hate Hillary so much, or I hate the establishment. I want to do this to them.
Oh, there's no question, Lance. And for over a year now, 75% of the American public have said they don't want either one of these candidates. And a majority of Democrats inside the Democratic Party have said they wanted somebody else than President Biden to run. Okay, so given that, it's to your point, the public has to make the decision of the lesser of two evils. And it's not a prominent place to be in the political process. Okay, so what's happening? But the information is a little more dire than that. I've been told by my counterparts that down ticket, that with President Biden on top, their chances of holding the Senate or taking the House are diminished. And what they can't afford as ideologues is to run a ticket that loses the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, loses Congress. Because in the next 4 years, they'll have nothing to rely upon except their premises of their concepts, which are not functional. Okay, so where are we? The last thing I was told, that their last ditch effort on the comparison of the two candidates, which one is least acceptable, is that President Trump would be convicted and be found to be a felon. Now that's happened. He hasn't been sentenced yet at the airing of this show, but that's not the question. I mean, they can exacerbate that emotion by a too stiff a sentence. But the problem is not the problem. The scenario is that he has been convicted and found to be a felon under a competent jurisdiction of law by a jury, and if he's still leading at the end of the Republican convention in July, I think you're going to see some maneuvering. Now, I don't know what it is.
So let me summarize what I heard Marc say, and Mercedes, you can throw something there if you want to. What Marc is saying is his counterparts, these political consultants, because he actually ran that Pat Robertson campaign, as I recall, as a campaign manager. You've done campaign management. You've run a lot of governors, senators, and congressional elections, too. He's saying that in the consulting community, in what you and I, from our distance call the swamp, but there's actually a whole, it's millions of jobs are working around this political apparatus where trillions of dollars is transacted. He's saying that the counterparts are talking to him. These are the people that are in the business of politics, and they kind of all know each other. They're saying the down ticket damage of having Biden is such they can't afford In other words, it's a drag on the congressional race. It's a drag. In other words, you want to have a president like they have with Obama that comes out and smiles and acts cool, and it's like, oh, it gave me a 2 or 3 point bounce, and they're vying to get that energy. These people don't want Biden shuffling on and embarrassing them with a freeze moment that's going to make them look like they're following, the side that's, that's in geriatric and incapable of governing. So they're going to have to do something. Trump's going to come out with a hate. I think I've heard one guy say, "No, don't underestimate the power of the hatred of the people against what they're doing to Trump." To me, it doesn't gain points on the left. The View loves it. They applaud it. They're gleeful. They're happy. But nobody really, in the average American that is kind of starting to get tuned in on politics, they don't see it as he deserves it. They see it as, what did he do? Did he kill somebody? Did he steal something? No, it's Stormy. Oh, that porn lady? And it's like, they're going to put him in jail? It's like, so it's playing out so that actually the crosstabs are saying, the Hispanic vote, African-American males, they're actually looking at Trump more and more as a Mandela factor. Like, you're going to lock this guy up? I actually relate to the blue-collar billionaire better than I do to these operatic, these guys in politics. Does that enter into your awareness at all?
Yes, but the basic decision-making process of the public is really, I think, simpler than that. The American public believes we're on the wrong track. Again, unprecedented duration of time, 75% saying the country's on the wrong track. The national press gnashes their teeth, trying to make the point that the economy is better. Why doesn't Biden get credit for it? It's not that much better, Lance. So we could go into that, and some of this we can maybe talk about later in the show. But prices were up 8 to 10%, and the prices are still up. They haven't come down. Now, inflation may have been reduced over the last 3 years, but not prices. And they still go up incrementally. And we're past a point where over 40% of the population can basically can't afford fundamental requirements of living for their family. Okay, so given that, and they're looking at, well, who can solve the problem? As an analyst, I think about the fact that going back to when Bill Clinton was president, he was worried about the fact that he had smoked marijuana in college, and that was going to eliminate him from being president of the United States. Remember, he said, I didn't inhale.
Man, we've gone a long distance from there, haven't we?
I think where we've come from, in your and my generation, where we've come from, on what that was a criteria for the proper foundation for being president to where we are today. The American public wants somebody who will take dramatic action to cure our problems economically, secure our borders, deal with our foreign adversaries in a proactive way that protects the United States of America. And I hate to put it in these terms, but they're not going to vote for somebody. And they see crisis coming, by the way. They can't explain it. They can't articulate.
The average American has a sense of dread,
They do.
Anticipation. It's something. They have the COVID trauma. Now they're thinking something's coming.
Yeah, and what has happened from all the immigrants that have come across the border unchecked and so on and so forth. And they want a strong person with conviction, and they're more concerned about that in their decision-making process than his past character or what he's done in his private life. And if that prevails by the end of July, then they're in big trouble with this ticket.
All right, so they're going to have to roll out Biden. Let me just take one more minute on the subject. What do you think they're going to do?
Well, I mean...
What are the options?
Well, there are a few. And this is all speculation.
See, Marc is more dignified. The audience to know, Marc is more dignified than the guys that I throw out that I run with. He's a true statesman. Remember this, because now you're going to hear the measured scenario. Like when I was, some other of my buddies were talking, it's like, well, Michelle Obama is going to go out there. She doesn't want the job. What are you going to do with Kamala Harris? I mean, she is the female minority diversity, equity, and inclusion candidate. And so forget about whether she's any smarter than anybody else. They can't take her off the ticket without a backlash from their base. So they have to have somebody like that on the top of the ticket. So then I heard General Michael Flynn throwing out there, I think they could throw Hillary back in there, which would be a great rematch. It's kind of like the Rumble with round 2 with Hillary and Trump. And she should have been locked up, and they are going to lock up Trump is going to be the thing. But what is there a more dignified, Texas?
The scenarios,
match?
I appreciate that introduction. I try to deal with facts that I know that I can support and verify. But there's probably the legal way to do it is you could either go through the convention, and you can have you can change the ticket after the convention. That happened with George McGovern in 1972. A gentleman by the name of Senator from Missouri, Thomas Eagleton, after the convention was found to have had electric shock treatments, and that was unacceptable. Well, I mean, really unacceptable back then. So they removed him from the ticket, held a mini convention on less than 2 weeks' notice, and nominated Sergeant Shriver, and that was the ticket in the general election. Now, as a lawyer, I question whether that was legal or not, but they did it, and that's the precedent. Look, Lance, I know if the rumors that I hear in D.C. is that if a move is made, the president will actually step down from the presidency. Kamala Harris becomes president. Then she can pardon Hunter Biden if she wants to, take the hit. His legacy is he did this for the good of the country for whatever reason. You now have an African American or black woman, let's just make it woman, first president of the United States. They could do this at the convention or right after. And either way, and replace the ticket with whoever they want. Now, who would that be? The name we've heard from past October is Michelle Obama. You have to take her at her word that she doesn't want to do it. Who else could they put on there? The other thing that I understand is that they're polling and doing focus groups as we speak. What if this, what a focus group is, your audience knows, it's 12, 15 people in a room, or maybe 50 people that represents...
That represent the demographic that you want to influence.
That influence, and you spend like 3 or 4 hours with them and just talk to them. Well, what about this? Well, what about this? Well, what if this happened? Well, what if the ticket looked this way? And they're looking and looking and looking for that right combination. Now, I've also been told they're having trouble finding it. I mean, then they start worrying, well, what are they qualified? And because here's the other problem that the Democratic strategists have. We're not in a good situation in the economy. We do have international problems. We do have threats on our border. And the public doesn't want anybody inexperienced that hasn't stated emphatically with great clarity what they will do when they're president. They want somebody who will take charge and do what they think is necessary to secure the United States. I don't think they found that combination yet. And so the other is they leave President Biden. I mean, he stays on the ticket, and it depends on, as I said, and by the way, if the polls show that 5 or 10% of the public says, I just can't vote for a convicted felon, even though it's questionable, I don't know whether it was a political court or not. And then there's also that scenario.
Well, there's that scenario, and there's the illegal immigration votes. I mean, how many of those 8 million are going to be funneled into the voting illegally? Biden is looking for 500,000. If you can win an election with 170,000 votes from 4 swing states, and he's going to be equivalent of pardoning or legitimizing 500,000 voters that are all dreamers he's pushing through. I don't know if he can do that, but why stop at 500,000? Why not do 1 million and get them all registered to vote? I mean, this is the extent to which the desperate left is working. But I don't want to pin myself on that subject. I want to go to something else. I got 12 minutes here. Mercedes, did you have anything you want to do as we leave the what's going to happen in the election?
No, I think it's good. I like Marc's analysis yesterday when we were talking about it, and I think it's awesome that we've shared it. So we'll see how this plays out. I'm excited.
All right, you did an extensive study. I want to just take 5 minutes to talk about it because this was a very important study that most people don't even know about. You helped conduct a study on what are the present thinking. They're going to do their focus groups. Well, if they went to your study, they wouldn't need a focus group because you've already done an exhaustive analysis of what Americans really think. And I think you guys would be fascinated by what Marc came up with. So go ahead and share that with us.
We call it the Tocqueville study. It was basically what does American think and why do they think it? It wasn't current events, even though we got into events. but where do you get the opinions and attitudes that you project? What are your true values? So if you have 30% of Americans that believe we should have open borders because the world is a global society, and 70% that don't, just ask the question, where does that opinion come from? Where's the well of values that is the definition of your personal convictions come from? And a lot of it stems from what they learned as children on biblical laws and principles and morality. But the bottom line is the most important thing to Americans across age groups, ethnicity, regions, ideology, is family, the security and the relationship of their family. Well, we ask the question, what are you willing to die for? What is the principle you feel so strongly about? And it's not conservative versus liberal. It's not Republican versus Democrat. I would die for the defense and the unity of my family. And that's what we found. Now, if you change the viewpoint, in other words, it's the point is that it's not just about family values. It's about the value of family.
Oh, it's interesting. Not family values, it's the value of family.
That's important, but it's about the value of family. And no party is speaking to Americans on, look, whatever I represent, whatever I'm going to do, the policies that I'm going to advocate is, in my view, lining up with how you value your family. And this is beyond the divisive moral issues that we like to spend time on. It's about a good education. It's about security in the neighborhood. Security is a big issue. Crime is a big issue. It's about being able to make choices for their families. You know, Lance, you and I have talked about this at length, that when God set up the process for running society, the first and most important relationship is an individual's relationship with the Lord and making the decision that he's sovereign and you're going to obey him. So one-on-one, God to the individual. The next unit of authority is the family. And that is where you frame your family values. What do you want for your family? What do you want for the future? What do you want your children to know about the generational transition of principles? What do you want them to take from what you believe that's in best for their lives? And then the third entity of authority is the city. That's the political authority. And states are made up of cities, and the federal government's made up of states. But education, hospitals, recreation is largely a city authority managed system. And it's unique to the United States of America. And when we get to the economics of what's coming in the Great Reset, that is one of the greatest advantages of why America is exceptional. We are the only country in the world that allows local authority, economic and otherwise, that we do in this country. School bond issues for education. The school board runs the schools at the local city level, hospitals, road construction, the growth of the city, parks and recreation are city decisions. The federal government doesn't even know about it, and the states don't impose themselves on it. Every city does its own thing. And in every other country in the world, the federal government has some sort of input in what a city can make a decision upon its finances, its education, its health care, anything else. And the reason is because we're the only country other than ancient Israel that was established under the premise that God is sovereign over man and man is sovereign over government. We didn't have a king telling us from the inception of 1776 what was in the best interest of just the federal government. It was just the opposite. That's what we learned in this study, and that's what they want candidates to talk about.
So let me try and summarize this. The family, because you got a lot of crosstabs in there, but family is a priority. And who is the most influential in shaping people's opinions about who to vote for and how to vote? Did you come up with any data on that?
Yes. And it's a little frightening because they don't have anybody they trust anymore.
All right. So the survey says the news media isn't shaping, and Hollywood isn't doing it, entertainment isn't doing it.
I mean, my joke is that I spent my life as a lawyer, and we're usually the last guys to public trust. The news media is now below a lawyer, an insurance salesman, or a car salesman.
So who is the most influential guy in the neighborhood when it comes to shaping Who are you going to vote for, Charlie? Who are they going to ask that?
Well, until this last cycle, they talked to each other in the community. Now, I know this may sound trite, but the United States of America lives in social precincts. They don't live in voting precincts. And a social precinct is where you work, you live, you play, you recreate. It could be anything from a bowling league to guys that play golf together. Those are social precincts. And without any leadership that they trust right now, it's really, I use the word frightening, because they don't trust national institutions. They don't trust the heads of parties. They don't trust elected officials. And what is it they don't trust? That they're not telling them, they instinctively know they're not telling them the truth about what they need to know to protect themselves and their family.
What's the role of the local business guy?
Okay, now, the last vestige of trust is a small family business owner. Now, we've known that for some time. And the reason is they believe that a family business owner in the local city would not do anything or support any policy that would harm their families or the city where they make a living and a profit.
Okay, now think about that. So folks, let me just slow this down. So when you go to the softball game and you see sponsored by like Patriot Mobile here, like in Dallas, or, or Christian Brothers Auto, if the guys at Christian Brothers Auto or the owner is there at the softball game and the kids are there, folks are going to listen to him and go, what do you think about this next election? Well, I'm doing this because, my business can't afford to do another 4 years. Their economic perspective is trustworthy because you're within the oikos, in the Hebrew word for house of faith, right there in the community.
And in the economic community where they all lived and survived together.
Now, I don't want to leap into this. We're going to have to end this show right now, but I want to set it up for. I want you guys to pay attention to the guys like Marc Nuttle here, because where we're going to go next is the collapse of the economy. You're hearing his very stable, reasoned, temperate, considered voice, right? When a guy like this says the house of cards is coming down, suddenly I'm looking for the exits. Now, we're going to do the next show. We're going to talk about what's happening with the global meltdown. How's it going to affect the United States? And I want to come back to this one point, which is very important for everybody there. What about the role of the local community? Because I think that scenario of it all comes down to, and I think people might have been missing what you were saying, that governments in the world control what happens, and at a local level, you got to kind of pay off somebody to get permission to do something. That's the totalitarian, Marxist, dictatorial, or Islamic system of the hierarchy has the head and you're the serf. In America, it was inverted. It's supposed to be government is not interfering with you when you wake up in the morning. You're free to do everything short of breaking the law. And you can go out and do what you want to do. It's going to break down the system, the whole system. Both sides are breaking down. But it's going to come down to local levels of innovation, efficiency, cooperation, and community are going to rebuild faster if they have community at the city. Christianity is going to be put to the test, because where Christian values and civic values are, and old-fashioned community values, which thank God America still has, at a local level, it will come together and try to create a way to make it through. Is that what your research indicates? Because we got 2 minutes to set up the next show.
Yes, and with what's coming, if we don't get off this course, the body of Christ is going to have an opportunity to provide solutions at the local level, much like the 4th century Christians did at the fall of the Roman Empire. And now I'm not predicting that great a collapse, but there is economic strife coming. If we continue to deficit spend to the extent that we are, we'll go through that and what that's doing with our trading partners. But the opportunity exists for us to be a solution without necessarily having to have the permission of government to do it.
So you're basically saying the family itself is a far more powerful building block and electoral block in terms of what's going to happen in the next election. And they're ultimately going to the highest level of appeal you've got is what's in your best interest. And you keep using the word freedom, that given a choice between freedom and security, we may be in trouble in America because a lot of people are becoming incrementally accustomed to the government being the security and not their own personal resourcefulness. But, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. We'll end the broadcast here, and we're going to pick up the next one with the future of the global meltdown economically. What's going to happen to the United States? Where does China fit in? And in the balance of end times theology, going into this whole idea of a global government, one world economic system, how close are we to that? And is there a path, a narrow path, for God to do something in the end times that will be a maximizing of harvest and the move of God in the midst of a global shaking? You don't want to miss the next show, because that's the question I'm going to throw at Marc. We'll be right back. Actually, we won't be right back. We'll be back tomorrow with the next installment. You don't want to miss it. What happens if a natural disaster takes place? We have these weird tornadoes that hit in the Midwest and in Texas, but look at the hurricanes in Florida. People can literally have their houses flooded, or they're in a situation where they have no food or access to groceries. Everyone needs at least a 4-week emergency food kit. And fortunately, My Patriot Supply has created a 4-week emergency kit. And these products will last for 25 years. The interesting thing is they give you a 2,000 calorie per day meal. And that's the key. Delicious and 2,000 calories a day, because that's what you're going to need to sustain yourself for 4 weeks in a crisis. We had a winter freeze here in Texas, of all places. And we had a couple of days where we had no electricity. I'm telling you something, this makes a huge difference. Mushroom rice pilaf, fluffy rice and mushrooms, seasoned with red wine and herb. And then how about starting the day off? Maple Grove oatmeal, old-fashioned oats, maple flavoring with a pinch of brown sugar. This is what you want to do. 4-week emergency food kit, and that's just for you. Think about your children. Guarantee somebody around you is going to need help. You're going to want to at least have the 4-week emergency kit. Go to lancewallnau.com/Patriot. Use that link, and you're going to get a special discount on their special 4-week emergency kit promotion.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to navigate the world